Today we have a simple objective, team. Deadlifts. I'm now after the box. We're going to do some deadlifts, and my back cave subject today is going to be all about deadlifts. We're going to have some slow-mos, we're going to have some different video footage and stuff to see if we can get you guys and girls lifting more if you want to lift more, or lifting more effectively without the worry of injury or am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong. So that being said, let's get to the freaking box. Right, before we go into the box, let me just explain a little bit ahead of time. I'm going to have a little bit of chat and bits and pieces through these deadlifts and through the session, just general chit chat, but I'm going to break most of it down in the back cave subject. So if you just want to see the breakdown of the deadlift stuff, go to the time that's being displayed right now and you can do that. Otherwise, come along, watch the session, have some fun, maybe a little bit of chitter chatter, and let's go and get warmed up. Deadlift warm up, posterior chain, hamstrings, going to be releasing the ankles off, glutes are going to be activated, all of the trunk, so the erectors are going to be warmed up, the lats are going to be stretched off, arms, everything. Key kit, straps, which I'll come back to in just a sec. Worn and done thumb straps, which I always wear because I do all of my deadlifts essentially for my crossover, for my clean. So I use a hook grip, I don't do the twist grip. We can talk about that later in the back cave. Also, when it gets super heavy, I always use a Nike nipple belt. So, let me sit down. When it comes to straps, they're a bit of a contentious subject for a lot of people. I use them, and a lot of normal people, I say a lot of people will normally use them wrong. Sorry if I'm having to go at anyone, but I use them for a specific reason, because the main focus of my session right now is to improve my strength in my back, so my deadlift. I'm not worrying about my grip work. So I know that my grip will fail before my back will in a deadlift. So when I use straps is when I'm doing 8 sets of really heavy deadlifts. If I'm doing a 1 rep max, for instance, I'm not going to use straps because that's where I'm really testing my deadlift and my grip to go with it. But when I'm doing voluminous workouts with my deadlifts, I know that I want more work over my back, and the only way to get that is to get those straps on there. So if you're using straps for every deadlift session just because, I don't know, Torkayev and everyone else are using them for that reason, then don't. Just change it, because they'll be using them for exactly the same specific, specialized reason. They might be doing, for instance, snatch pulls or something like that at a ridiculously heavy weight, but they're doing 5 or 6 reps opposed to 1. So they're going to use straps. So let's get warmed up and let's get straight into it. So warm up done. While I put these on, let's talk deadlift formation. Again, all of my deadlifts are done for a specific reason. I use a clean grip because I want that transfer of power and strength over to help my clean pull. So a lot of people do sumo deadlifts. Nothing wrong with sumo deadlifts. I don't do them because they don't have any crossover for the type of training that I'm doing. So if you prefer sumo deadlifts, each to their own. That's absolutely fine. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't see the benefit from my training specifically. Nice and tight. So now we're going to move into the sets. I'm going to be working up to a heavy. I normally take about 6 sets. So I've got 40 on there at the moment. I'll do a few reps on that, 40. Then I'll go straight up to 60. Do a few reps, 4 to 6 reps, up to 80, then straight up to 100. And then as I start getting towards my working weight, just to save energy, I'll do 1 rep at each weight with really nice tension. So as we'll be talking about, is lat tension is a massive part of a strong deadlift, chest nice and high. Right, now up to working weight. 150, which will be a PB, sets of 8 for me. Last time I did 140s. You'll also notice that I haven't worn my belt yet and I haven't used my straps yet. Again, they come in at the right times. I find psychologically, bringing the belt in on the first working set, first of all, helps. It's like a nice little thing to brace against. Second of all, I can be fully sure that my back is fully awake, my core is tight, I've warmed it up properly. Strap wise, again, I'm using them for volume. So because I'm doing low reps at the moment, don't really need to worry too much about my grip. Now is where these straps are really going to come into their own. Let's get some grind work done. every set of 8. I'm 150. Very happy with that. Oh, my bum hurts. Last thing I'm doing before I go home, break down deadlifts and give you guys some killer information. There's a little 10-minute EMOM, a variation of something that we did over in Berlin with Zach. Every minute on the minute for 10 minutes. It's going to be 8 wall balls at 9 kilos and 8 burpees. It's quite gassy. I did it at 10s and 12s, I think, with Zach. So yeah, it's a non-competitive environment. I've got no one else to pace with me, so I'm going to bring the pace down or the numbers down a little bit more and just go for consistency. So it's probably going to hurt. That was rank. 10 minutes. Funny thing is as you see, at the start I was like, it's alright, finishing in like 36, 37 seconds. And I averaged around 38 all the way through. Last round I did 10 and 10 and finished on 50 seconds. It just felt like, even though it was 20 seconds, the break was getting shorter and shorter. So now, stretch, get home, have some lunch, and then we're gonna break all of this down in the back cave. Oh yeah. Right, I'm doing it before I even have my lunch. Look at this. Get yourself comfy, kids. I've even taken my shoes off to make sure that I'm comfortable. I just wanted to get this done so you've actually got the information before I start thinking about what am I gonna have for lunch and all that kind of stuff, and I get out of the mood from the session. So, just wanna add a little bit more context and a little bit more reassurance to avoid certain questions that I know that I'll get if I don't cover them straight away. First of all, why don't I use switch grip? Because I know a lot of people use switch grip for a conventional deadlift. I do not have a problem with that at all. It will definitely add around 10 to 15% to your deadlift. But as I said in my session, I don't deadlift to have a heavy deadlift. I'm not trying to build a heavy deadlift. I'm deadlifting to help my clean and to help my clean pull. So you'll notice my setup's slightly different. I use a hook grip. It's all because I'm trying to set up for my clean. So then when I go to do a heavy clean, I feel really comfortable in that position. So just to add context, my deadlifts, you've got different moods or different rhythms when it comes to deadlifts. You can deadlift to lift heavy, or you can deadlift to help you as a crossover for something else. And for me, I'm of that. I'm doing it as a crossover for my cleans, just to clear that up as well. So, and also I've got enough imbalances without twisting my hands and stuff like that. So I don't really worry about that unless I was to go for like a super heavy single and my grip was a little bit torched. I would probably use a switch grip in that sense. Same reason as I was using the straps today as well. I added context there. So let's look at it. Also, sumo deadlifts, don't have a problem with them, but again, they add nothing to my training. My training is all tailored towards my lifts at the moment with my heavy stuff, so sumo deadlifts never gonna help me for any of the Olympic lifting that I'm doing, but they are still a very good variation for people who prefer that position to pull from. Right, setting up with the bottom of a deadlift, right? First thing, now I'm gonna retract a little bit there. Right, so most of us will know, and if you don't, absolutely fine, but let's just start breaking it down a little bit. Understanding the movement a little more. A deadlift is predominantly a posterior chain activated movement, right? We're pulling. It's a compound lift, it's a multi-joint action. So as you heard when I was warming up my calves, my hamstrings, firing my glutes up, hip extensors, which are obviously gonna help you in the second part of the pull. Really warming up my lats and my trunk and my core. Arms are gonna get a little bit warm, shoulders are gonna get warm, traps are gonna get tight as well. But also you'll notice that I said about warming my ankles up or mobilizing my ankles, because obviously my ankle mobility is not amazing. So when I start sitting down into a squat, the last thing I want when I'm setting up for a deadlift and I start to pull is that I feel my weight lifting up onto my toes, because that is not going to be good for a decent deadlift. So mobilizing my ankles is just going to allow me to flex down and sit down into the bottom of the movement and feel a little bit more like my weight is distributed through my arch and heel for the deadlift. So you'll notice that I always set my feet up just underneath my hips and I slightly turn my toes out a little bit, because that's normally how I'm gonna start my clean. And also, if you're doing it for heavy deadlifts, think power production. The most force that you can get from your body upwards is when your feet are under your hips, right? So have them directly under your hips. You'll notice people who lift really heavy deadlifts, unless they're doing sumo. If they're doing a conventional, you'll notice that their feet are really close together, because that's where we've got the most force. It's down the midline, underneath the hips. So you set your feet there, and then you'll notice that I always take my thumbs to the end of the knurling each side, and then I go a full thumb length from each side before I wrap round and really dig it into the grooves of my thumb. That's because that's where my clean grip is. So every single time, it's like a robotic movement now. I walk in, I set my feet, my thumbs are long, wrap them round, tuck it in, and then I hook grip until I start using my straps, and then my straps essentially become a hook grip. Get that set. There is nothing worse than walking up to a deadlift and trying to change it every single time you do it. The first couple of weeks that you're doing deadlifts, you'll probably be more worried about not putting your back out and that kind of stuff, which we'll cover in just a sec. But try and get your grip set and try and get your feet set and be robotic about it, because if you approach every set like that, it's going to become a nice habit and it will feel comfortable. You'll feel confident before you start your pull every time you go into your deadlifts. So set that. Then, obviously, as well as knowing that it's a posterior chain activation movement, God, I could just said predominantly the back of the legs and the upper back. We also know that it's a pull movement, right? No, it is a pull movement from the hips up. But one thing that will help your deadlift massively, if you understand this very quickly, it's also a push movement. From the hips down, you are pushing the ground away with your legs. So many people just set themselves up and yank the bar up and think it's all my back doing it just because we're putting it on a back day. A deadlift has so much work to come from the legs as well. So you are driving the ground away as well as pulling the bar up through your upper body. That's one thing that's going to help you stay set and symmetrical all the way through your deadlift. You're not going to lose your lower back. Your bum's not going to rise super quick. Just remember, you're pushing away as well as pulling up. It's going to help your deadlift massively. I'm going to cut there for a second. So now you've got yourself completely set. What is going through your mind before you pull a bar? 9 times out of 10, what I see, or when I speak to people, they're like, oh, I don't know, 8 reps, or what am I gonna have for lunch, or wonder what the next exercise is gonna be, or I really don't wanna hurt my back. All of these things stop one thing happening before you do a deadlift: tension. Right? When I get into the bottom of a deadlift, you'll notice that my legs are quite straight to start with, because what I'm doing is getting plenty of air in, pushing it down into my belly, and then just as I feel like I couldn't take another breath, then I sink down. I'm externally rotating my shoulders, packing my shoulder blades back. I lift my chest a little bit and I sink down into my mid to back foot. That is nice tension position for me. The bar should be pretty much touching my shins all the way up. And as I start to pull, I always flex the bar first. I never pull the bar dead from the floor because it tends to push my bum up and I lose tension and I'll lean forward. So I don't actually classify my lift as started until I can feel all the weight where that bar's started to bend and just started to rise. Then I've got a nice angle in my back to pull from the shins all the way up to when we get to the brutal sticking point for a lot of people, just above the knee. Right, so I filmed a couple. These are a little bit of aggressive ones just to make them obvious. But how many people get to this point in a deadlift and your shoulders are forward, your bum's just not extended, you just can't finish that deadlift, right? Right, there's a couple of things that could be going on here, and I really want you to focus on activating these areas and working on them with some accessory stuff if you can, if you're struggling with this area, because you will avoid a big back injury at some point if you do. A lot of people will focus and go, well, the hips aren't extended, so you need to work on the glutes. Yes, massively. You have to have strong glutes to help that hip extend at the top of a deadlift. But an area that a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to is here. What's this area? The thoracic part of the spine. If you've gone halfway up a deadlift and you're dropping down more and more and more with the shoulders because you just can't hold your scaps back because you're weak in the mid and lower trap area and other surrounding areas, it doesn't matter how strong your glutes are because you can still extend your hips and look like this in your shoulders. You know, obviously I could have done that a lot better. But do you see what I mean? They're two things that are just essentially, if they're both weak, you're pushing them down in the middle. So get your glutes strong, yes, but make sure that you fully activate your scaps, your traps, all 3 areas of your traps, and your lats have got to be tight throughout a deadlift. Otherwise, you will start to pull your shoulders forward. So don't just think it's just your glutes, just because they're an extensor. You've got to look at the other supporting areas and you think, if my back's gone a little bit, is it because it's weak? Did I pack my shoulders back enough? Do I need to work on that upper area, keeping my chest elevated throughout the lift? There you go. There's some cracking information. Let you just take all of that in. Also as well, a lot of people have what we call like an early bum rise in a deadlift. This is super, super common, right? And it's because all of the weight pushes forward over the balls of the feet very quickly and you haven't taken the time to set up. If the bum goes up really quickly, you've just pushed the legs away, but you haven't felt the weight. So make sure when you start your deadlift, as I was saying earlier, you're keeping the weight even. It's an even pull and push movement to start with, and then you fire through the movement. And just to go back, when we're talking about slightly losing the upper back, right? There is two very different types of losing the upper back. There's a lot of people who have this scare tactic approach with a deadlift, thinking you have to have your chest and back really tight and everything has to be like a perfect straight line all the way up. But if you look at some of the biggest powerlifters in the world, right? Obviously they're lifting massive weights, so mechanically things will start to break down. But even at those low percentages, 50, 60, 70%, some of them do have their shoulders slightly forward. Some of them, their back is slightly rounded. But there's a difference between a back slightly rounded under tension, i.e. you're protecting the spine, and there's a difference between that and a back slightly rounded because you've lost tension and you're putting a lot of pressure through your back. So just remember, a deadlift isn't bad just because the shoulders might be forward a little bit. It's only classified as bad, in my opinion, if the shoulders are forward and there's no tension supporting the spine, all right? So just to clear that up, because everybody's different. There is so many different types of deadlift and form and position out there. There's people deadlifting 600 kilos in the world who have got a slightly rounded back. Are you gonna turn around and say that they're worried about their back? No, they've got plenty of tension supporting it. So takeaway points with the deadlift. Make sure you get into a routine setup position. Make sure you're thinking of it as a push movement as well as a pull movement with your deadlift. Make sure you're keeping tension throughout. Reset at the top of every rep. Get a nice belly full of air if you need to. Try not to bounce the weight off the floor because you want to get a full range. And you should feel that bar almost scraping against your legs all the way up and all the way down. Other than that, if you've got weak areas that I may have touched upon, make sure you're doing your accessory work because it will really help. And then finally, the other thing I would say is context. Why are you doing your deadlifts? Deadlifts are a phenomenal, phenomenal movement that I would happily put in every single person's training plan if I could. And they are amazing. You've just got to make sure you're doing them for the right reasons. You know, why are you doing it? I'm doing it as a crossover for my cleans and my lifts. Are you doing it because you want a heavy deadlift? Amazing. If you're not doing it for a heavy deadlift, think of the most effective way that you could use a deadlift to add to the thing that you want to gain strength in. So if it's unilateral movement, I'd be saying spend a lot more time doing single leg deadlifts, for instance, because they're going to cross over to your unilateral style of training that you want. All right, so I hope this really helped, guys. It might be a little bit much and a lot of information to take in, but the fact is everybody's different. I want you to all just at least take one thing away to help, even if it's just tension, lat tension, push and pull, whatever it may well be. Take one thing away. If you've got any more questions, put them down below. I feel like this has been an awesome back cave. If you agree, let me know in the comment box below. If you want anything else, as we always say, ask a question and we'll bring it to the cave. Have a fantastic day, guys, and a great weekend, because this is a Friday. So I'll speak to you soon. Later.